The instant the doctor looked at my lab results, I knew my life was about to change. His face drained of color. He didn't explain anything. He didn't reassure me. He simply excused himself and walked out of the emergency room. Through the glass wall, I watched him make a phone call. One hand pressed against his temple like his brain was struggling to accept what he was seeing. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. This time, he wasn't alone. 3 senior specialists stepped into the room and stared at me as if I didn't belong in the bed I was lying in. Their expressions weren't sympathy or fear. It was disbelief. Pure, stunned disbelief. My name is Nolan Webb. I was 38 years old, and just 3 months earlier, I had been scrubbing toilets in this same hospital for minimum wage. Back then, I wore a dull grey uniform with my name stitched above the pocket. I pushed a yellow mop bucket down hallways filled with people who never looked twice at me. I existed, but I wasn't seen. 3 months earlier, I was nothing. Before that, I was everything I had worked my entire life to become. For 15 years, I had been a structural engineer. A senior one. I designed hospitals, corporate towers, and university building structures meant to stand long after I was gone. My salary had reached over $200,000 a year. I had a home in the suburbs, a retirement plan, and a future that felt solid. Then, my wife decided that my future wasn't good enough. Simone wanted more money, more status, more admiration. She found it in a wealthy tech investor named Victor Holbrook, a man with private jets, yachts, and connections in places I never needed before. She didn't just leave me, she erased me. Victor made quiet phone calls, important ones. Within weeks, I was fired without explanation. Within months, no engineering firm would even interview me. My reputation collapsed overnight, and I had no way to fight back. Simone took the house, half my savings, and what was left of my dignity on my first night working as a janitor. She sent me a photo of herself on Victor's yacht somewhere in the Caribbean. Her message was short and deliberate. Enjoy poverty. 3 months later, I was lying in an emergency room bed, bleeding through my uniform after a shattered light bulb tore into my hand. 16 stitches. Enough blood loss to worry the nurses. I didn't care at that point. Part of me hoped they'd find something terminal. At least then, the struggle would have an end. But instead, the doctors returned with questions. One of them, a genetics specialist, sat beside my bed and asked, something that felt completely unrelated, "Mr. Webb, was your father adopted?" I nodded. My father, George Webb, had been adopted as a newborn in the early 1950s. He never searched for his biological parents. He believed family was about loyalty, not blood. The doctor took a slow breath. Then she said a name tied to steel empires, skyscrapers, universities, and billions in charitable foundations. A name every powerful institution in Pennsylvania recognized. According to my genetic profile, I was the biological grandson of Elliot Thornwood. Elliot Thornwood had died 2 months earlier at the age of 9. His estate was worth over $9 billion. Publicly, he had no living heirs, but privately, his son had fathered a child in secret, a baby given away to protect the family name. That baby was my father, which meant I was the sole surviving heir. The room spun. My ears rang. I barely heard the rest. 3 months earlier, my ex-wife told me to enjoy poverty. That night, lying in my own blood, I learned that poverty was about to disappear, and justice was suddenly affordable. I hadn't always been invisible. I grew up in a working-class home. My father spent decades in a steel mill. His hands were scarred and rough, but he carried himself with quiet pride. He taught me that real worth came from endurance, not applause. My mother was a nurse. She believed in service, discipline, and integrity. She never fully trusted Simone. She once warned me, "That woman loves what you might become more than who you already are." I didn't listen. I believed marriage worked like engineering strong foundations. Careful planning, loyalty under pressure. I was wrong the night I discovered Simone's betrayal. I came home early with a migraine. I heard her laughing in our bedroom, a laugh she hadn't shared with me in years. I listened as she mocked me to another man, dismissing my work, my focus, my existence. She didn't deny it when I confronted her. She didn't apologize. She simply told me she wanted more. The divorce destroyed what Victor's phone calls hadn't yet touched. When I lost my job, the industry shut its doors to me completely. Friends went silent. Opportunities vanished. I went from a corner office to a studio apartment in one of the roughest neighborhoods in the city. I sold everything of value, but when there was nothing left to sell, I took the only job available: night janitor. The shame was suffocating. Doctors rushed past me without seeing me. Nurses spoke over me. I became part of the background until the night I became the patient. After the blood tests, the hospital contacted attorneys, then trustees, then private investigators. Within days, my identity was verified beyond any doubt. The inheritance was real, but I didn't rush into revenge. I waited, I watched, I rebuilt quietly. I hired lawyers, very good ones. They reopened my termination case, exposed Victor's interference, investigated financial manipulation, examined my divorce settlement with fresh eyes. Everything Simone and Victor had done relied on power without accountability. Now I had both. Careers fell. Contracts were terminated. Lawsuits appeared where arrogance once lived. The people who had destroyed me learned a lesson they never expected. Money doesn't just buy comfort, it buys consequences. I didn't destroy them loudly. I let the truth do it today. I no longer wear a grey uniform, but I still remember what it felt like to be invisible. And that memory ensures I lay there staring. I never forget who I listening to the quiet I came from of machines and the distant echo of footsteps in the hallway. My hand throbbed with every heartbeat, but the pain barely registered. My thoughts were somewhere else. I kept thinking about my father. George, he used to say that difficult seasons were the forge that shaped a man's character. That suffering didn't weaken you, it revealed you. Lying there in a blood-stained uniform, I wondered what he would think if he could see me now. Would he be disappointed? Would he tell me to keep going? Or would he simply nod the way he always did, as if he knew something I didn't? I didn't realize it then, but that night was about to rewrite everything I believed about my father, my family, and my place in the world. About an hour later, the door opened again. Dr. Adobio returned, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 other physicians followed him inside. They stood near the foot of my bed, exchanging quiet glances as if deciding who should speak first. The air in the room felt heavier. "Mr. Webb," Dr. Adobio finally said, choosing his words carefully, "we found some irregularities in your blood work. Because of that, I asked a few colleagues to review your results." My stomach dropped. I immediately assumed the worst. Cancer, leukemia, some rare disorder that would quietly close. the book on a life that already felt ruined. Strangely, a small part of me felt relief. If this was the end, at least the struggle would stop. Just tell me, I said. Whatever it is, I can take it. Dr. Adabio shook his head slowly. This isn't about illness, he said. What we found isn't a disease. It's genetic. Before I could ask what that meant, the door opened again. An older woman stepped inside, wearing a white coat and wire-rimmed glasses. There was authority in the way she carried herself, confident, unmistakable. The other doctors instinctively moved aside. Mr. Webb, she said, I'm Dr. Pauline Weaver, head of the genetics department here. I apologize for the surprise, but what appeared in your blood analysis is exceptional. She pulled a chair closer and sat beside me, her eyes studying my face carefully. I need to ask you a few questions about your family history, she continued. Specifically your father. Was he adopted? The question stunned me. Yes, I said after a moment. He was adopted as a baby, back in 1952. He never knew his biological parents. She nodded, as if that confirmed something she already suspected. Did he ever attempt to find them? Any records? Any names? No, I replied. He always said family wasn't about blood. He didn't care where he came from. Dr. Weaver was silent for a few seconds. Then she leaned forward slightly. Double quote, Mr. Webb, she said. Your blood contains genetic markers that we have encountered only once before in our entire medical database. These markers belong to a very specific lineage of family whose medical records have been preserved for decades due to their long-standing relationship with this hospital. My mouth felt dry. What family? I asked. She didn't hesitate. The Thornwoods. The name hit me like a blow to the chest. Everyone knew Elliot Thornwood had built one of the largest steel empires in American history. His foundation funded hospitals, universities, research centers, entire wings of buildings bore his name. Just 2 months earlier, his death had dominated headlines nationwide. His estate was valued at over $9 billion. But there was a problem. Elliot Thornwood had no recognized living heirs. His only son, Franklin, had died decades earlier in a car accident. According to public records, Franklin never had children. Elliot's will stated that if no biological descendants were found, the entire fortune would be distributed to charities. Dr. Weaver watched me carefully as understanding slowly took shape. Mr. Webb, she said gently, based on your genetic profile, you are the biological grandson of Elliot Thornwood. I felt like the air had been pulled from the room. That's not possible, I whispered. My father worked in a steel mill his whole life. He was nobody. He was never told the truth, she replied. Franklin Thornwood fathered a child in secret in 1952. The pregnancy was hidden. The baby was given up for adoption to protect the family's reputation. Your father was that child. The room felt smaller. My heartbeat roared in my ears. We ran the tests 3 times, she continued. DNA does not lie. You are the sole surviving heir. The weeks that followed were chaos. Lawyers, meetings, more blood tests, independent verifications. News outlets began circling like vultures, hungry for the story of a janitor who appeared from nowhere to claim a billionaire's fortune at first. The Thornwood Foundation contested everything. They argued mistake, coincidence, fraud. But science doesn't bend to opinion. 3 separate laboratories confirmed the results. Genealogists traced my father's adoption back to an orphanage. that coincidentally received major donations from the Thornwood family in the exact year my father was born. 6 weeks later, the court ruled in my favor. On a cold afternoon in Pittsburgh, I sat in a conference room surrounded by attorneys and officially accepted an inheritance of $9.40 billion. When I stepped outside, the winter air burned my lungs. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Nolan. I saw the news. Congratulations. I always believed in you. Maybe we should talk. I miss you. Simone. I read it once. Then I blocked the number. I felt nothing, but I wasn't finished. The first thing I did wasn't buy luxury cars or mansions. I hired investigators and attorneys not to protect my wealth, but to uncover the truth. Victor Holbrook's empire didn't survive scrutiny. Within weeks, evidence surfaced: insider trading, fraudulent investments, illegal market manipulation. Federal agencies took notice. The man who destroyed my career was finally held accountable. Then I made a phone call of my own. Richard Bowman answered in silence when I introduced myself. I informed him that Thornwood Holdings was terminating every contract with his firm. I also informed him that Victor Holbrook was under federal investigation. Thanks to information I personally provided, I wished him luck. Victor's fortune collapsed within months. Lawsuits followed. Charges were filed. Simone divorced him shortly after. I never spoke to her again. The money changed my life, but not my values. I lived simply. I donated billions to education, healthcare, and poverty relief. I funded a new nursing wing at the hospital my mother once worked in and named it after her. When she saw her name on that building, she cried in my arms. That was worth more than all the money combined. I learnt something important in my darkest days. Your bloodline doesn't define you. Your bank balance doesn't save you. Character does. My father died believing he was ordinary, but he raised an extraordinary man, and that legacy matters more than any inheritance.